Hello and welcome to the Energy Realities podcast with Tammy Neiman. How are you today, Tammy?
I'm doing well today. It's a windy, gusty autumn day in England.
Are there clouds or is it sunny?
No, it's cloudy. We had a bit of rain this morning, but yeah, windy, cloudy, gray.
What a beautiful solar energy in the UK today. We have David Blackman in Texas. What's the weather like in Texas?
It's beautiful. It's sunny. It's cold. It's autumn finally, and it's one of my favorite 3 weeks of the year. Our autumn season here in Texas.
It's 3 weeks.
Yeah, about how long it generally lasts. Yeah.
And we have Stu Turley in his bunker. Where?
In Oklahoma. I'm leaving for Abilene here pretty quick, so it's going to be a great day.
Have you been working with your backhoe recently?
Yeah, I've been figuring out a way to lob boulders at my neighbor. So you cannot beat this kind of entertainment. I've thrown it all out. I've figured out how Tesla solve the world's energy problems. I'm working on solving the geometry problems of lobbing boulders. So
wow, good luck with that. In the meantime, we are taking on one of the loudest voices for the energy transition, Mr. Bill Gates, who recently made a splash in the media by saying that climate change was not the biggest threat to humanity. And we had more immediate problems to solve before climate change, if you can believe that. Now, I personally think that one big reason for this change of opinion is that there is obviously a growing backlash against climate change driven policies across the world, really. But what other reasons may there be for this? Tammy?
Well, it's interesting because I would almost put the Trump effect in the title, because once again, this is an effect, I think, a secondary impact of what Trump has been doing. And I think primarily this is related not just to the new sort of trajectory of the Republican administration, but also the cutting of the USAID funds. Because one of the first things Bill Gates talks about in his notes is that there's been a 25% reduction in money going in to help his Gavi vaccine fund. And so because there's now all this new competition for funding, since USAID cut off so much going around the world, that they need to reprioritize where the money goes. And I would almost say that this is not a pivot by Gates. This is more of a refinement of what he's been talking about for a long time. So in his previous TED Talks and his book and all this kind of thing, he still talked about innovation. He still talked about needing to make investments in technology and so on and so forth, and how human health is really important, and his whole vaccine thing. But he also focused back then, a few years ago, on mitigation. And now he's kind of put mitigation aside and says, well, we need to invest in adaptation. So if you read through his actually kind of boring writing,
it really was hard to plow through that.
It was hard to plow through. And it's just like, good to read before bed, I suppose, help you go to sleep. But in any event, what he's really pushing is that he still supports net zero, but he wants more money invested in the different tech innovations. And he talked about fusion and needing this reliable energy for AI, but then doubling down also that wind and solar are cheaper than ever and cheaper than fossil fuels and blah, blah, blah. So he doesn't reject what he's said in the past. He's just kind of reprioritized and put adaptation first and put mitigation sort of farther down the totem.
But that's funny. Why would Bill Gates need federal funding from USA then? Whatever. I thought he was doing it with his own money. He has so much, and he's putting it to good use out of the goodness of his heart to save the planet. I'm confused.
Yeah, you know, that's a really good question. I think he puts a whole lot of his own money in, but a 25% cut in your operating budget, you know, that's a big chunk of cash. And so, you know, he puts it's one of these public-private partnerships, right? Where the foundations put their money in, and then the government puts a share in, and so on. But I think he's got all of these other investments. And what I think is most concerning is that what he stated in his notes to try and mobilize this conversation is almost a pitch for the different companies that he has investments in, where maybe before the Inflation Reduction Act, where it was helping, you know, some of these grants and subsidies, I'm not sure. But in any event, but now they need more investors. So he lists a bunch of tech things that he's been promoting, and, you know, oh, we need more investment in this and we need more investment in that. It's like pitching for other people to buy into companies that will benefit from whatever this adaptation sort of push is going to accomplish.
David, based on what Tammy just said, do you feel like Bill Gates may be starting to feel the real costs of the energy transition?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I first I want to just say I'm shocked to learn that Bill Gates might have a profit motive for making this transition in narrative, right? I mean, come on. Everything the man does, everything he's advocated in this space for 30 years has involved him building some kind of business to make profits from whatever it was he was advocating, even stopping cow farts. You know, he had a business designed to take advantage and develop technologies to stop cows from farting.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, in Denmark, they are decimating their cattle population now by forcing farmers to feed the cattle Bovaird. Is that what it's called? This feed that the cows don't like, and it's causing them to rapidly decline, and they're dying. And nobody in the climate movement gives a damn about those poor cattle, which is typical. Anyway, back to Bill Gates. Yes, I mean, I think this is all a reaction, as Tammy said, to what's happening in the United States with US aid and the rescission of $22 billion in grants to a bunch of NGOs that most likely Gates was involved in one way or another in some of them. And just the general reduction in spending by the U.S. government in subsidizing all of this nonsense. And, you know, for Bill Gates, it's important, I think, just in the overall debate, to have someone as prominent as he is making this shift. And I think he should be actually, to some extent, congratulated or wanting to divert more funding to what humanity actually does well throughout history, which is adapting to a changing climate and mitigating for the impacts of a changing climate, because the climate is always changes and changing, and sometimes it changes fairly radically over a short period of time. And so we've seen throughout history mankind being able to smartly adapt to these changing conditions, and that's what we have to do now. I have no use for Bill Gates. I think he's been an incredibly destructive force in this area for a long, long time. And I had my first real disagreement with Secretary Wright last week when he congratulated Gates for doing so much good work on vaccines and other medical issues in the third world, when actually he's been incredibly destructive and caused an awful lot of death and destruction in the third world over the last 20 years with his harebrained schemes. He's one of the most pernicious negative forces on the planet. and has been for a long time. And I'm going to be really interested to see how he's greeted by the Al Gores and John Kerrys of the world and Larry Finks of the world at the COP30 conference at the end of this month and at the WEF annual meeting in January. I think there's going to be some very interesting debates and conversations on what he's rolled out here.
Thank you, Stu. I know we all know you're a huge fan of Bill Gates.
Oh,
Have
you
been
bet.
for years.
He has
Do
a
you
wimpy.
think-
He has a really wimpy handshake. The only time I've ever met him, I gave him a very firm handshake, looked him in the eye, and said, "Bill, would you like to see how an operating system is supposed to work?" And he did not like my comment. But let's take a look at what I found very interesting. When you take a look at Gutfeld, let me set this up a little bit. I love the whole Tyrus, and Tyrus even follows me on my X account. That's kind of cool. He's never looked at my account, but I appreciate him following me. But Charles Payne was on Gutfeld. And I found this 1 minute segment very, very telling. And I wrote an article to follow up on that. So let me play this 1 minute clip
Do you
here.
think the opportunity costs for all of this, like the last 30 to 40 years, I don't think you can tabulate the opportunity costs. Trillions of dollars that you probably could have solved poverty in every third world country.
Yeah. And think about even right now, this AI race, the data center race. In New Jersey, they're talking about electricity costs. Well, the Democrat comes in and shuts down 5 plants right away, including a nuclear power plant. You go to war with fossil fuels. What the hell? Why? How are they going to get to work? None of it ever made any sense. And my theory is that at one point he was the richest person in the world and he was bored. He's like, how can I just figure, he had nothing to do, but he left the carnage that's out there. Think about all the pressure. I will say, cows, they wanted to stop cows from farting.
Yes.
I mean, right now, there's some cows out there like, oh, it's been since 2019. Don't walk past the pasture anytime in the next week. I'm going to let you know right now. There's been some cows on their farts for, what's that, since 2019. I really feel bad, though, for Greta.
Yes.
Greta. Bill, he's a billionaire. She's broke. She's like, activist for hire. Give me a cause. Gaza's gone now. The climate's gone. What is Greta going to be upset about?
That is true. Like, she can't hate the Jews anymore. She should, blame the Jews for climate change. And she kills 2 birds with 1 stone. You know the funny thing about the cattle thing? Do you know that it got so crazy that they were doing surgeries on cattle and putting their stomachs outside?
Watch
so
her.
They would
Look at her
fart
face.
into giant bags. Did you know this?
Okay. So I wrote this story after watching that. And when you sit back and take a look, Charles Payne is actually bringing it home. But what would Greta do instead of WWJD? What would Jesus do? I added WWGDN. What would Greta do now? So, I mean, this poor girl is now out of a job being an activist. But when you go through the actual trillions of dollars, let's take a look at some of this stuff that he's done. The European Union, which in emphasis on carbon, which Exxon this morning has actually come out and Reuters put out a story on Exxon having to think about getting out. That's a whole nother topic here in just a minute. The UK, under its net zero by 2050, has echoed Gates' calls for carbon capture, storage, and renewable subsidies. And it is now appearing that under all of this is that the climate catastrophe is a wealth transfer. The high cost of carbon capture, let's take Occidental Petroleum as an example. They're if a different U.S. government won in a new thing, Warren Buffett would look brilliant. But Occidental has gone through the direct carbon capture, and it has actually now set themselves up. Warren Buffett had to buy back in and have a buyout to reduce their debt, and carbon capture does not mean anything without the scheme behind it. So I have all of this in here. Then you have policy overreach, and you have Exxon versus California, the EU backlash. I have all of that. in the article for theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. So it was kind of fun taking a Gutfeld show and then writing a complete article on it.
That's
He,
awesome.
he mentioned on that show New Jersey. I just read a story in the Wall Street Journal that people in New Jersey are struggling, not everyone, but a lot of people are struggling to pay their electricity bills because they've gone so high because of all the data centers and the upgrades that are being done to the grid to accommodate this.
Let me share this story this morning. You all shared this out. Exxon warns EU law could force exit from Europe. What's the impact of the EU and investors? I went through and found the Antwerp. They've got several different huge investments. They've invested a lot. Let me pull up the numbers here. And here's the thing. This goes back to my discussion of bifurcation of trading blocks. I think we've been going to go through some trading block changes. If you're in the net zero camp, you're going to deindustrialize and then keep putting all of your trading and manufacturing with China. If you are then moving to a new block, which is using oil, gas, nuclear, which is against net zero, you're going to find ways of making those fossil fuels as clean as you can. You're going to be in a whole new block. But I found this very interesting at how impactful Darren Woods is. I mean,
have you noticed? No, go on, Stu. I'll go next.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Have you noticed, or is it just me, that Exxon is becoming really vocal about its criticism of the net zero affair? I mean, they're still in California. Darren Woods just said they might just up and leave Europe, which I totally understand. And Exxon also warned that the UK may be left without a single refinery in the not too distant future if they keep pushing with the carbon taxes and everything. Do you think that Exxon has had enough?
It's happening in California,
or is it all too obvious and the company can't stay silent in the face of this insanity?
If they don't stand up for themselves, who will? And
well, they didn't stand up for themselves for years, Stu.
Right.
Oh, I agree. But now Exxon just filed over the last week, a few days ago, a lawsuit against California on those things. So they're finally standing up, and it's going to be the fiduciary responsibility of the CEO to stand up for its shareholders and investors. When you look at the oil and gas companies of the United States, Exxon, Chevron, the majors, they are doing a better job in not going down 100% of the renewable. You had Oxy go down the carbon capture route because of the subsidies. The subsidies are going to dry up. They're now going to be holding to their shareholders in a different way. You have Total Energies, which is Oklahoma talk for, trying to speak.
Total Energies, yeah.
Yeah, Total Energies. But when you sit back and say, wait a minute, you've got BP, Shell, and the European that had flopped over to the renewable side, and then they have failed. They are now coming back in, and Total Energies has bought into United States natural gas assets, and they're now getting rid of theirs. So if the big oil companies don't defend themselves, they will be forced out of those markets. And we're seeing California as a national security risk, with the 20% of their refining capacity being shut down in the next few months. Actually, they're already starting to wind down, and I wouldn't want to do business in California. It's absolutely abysmal.
Not an oil company, and Exxon is largely out of California, other than a plastics operation and some retail, which they would have to find buyers for to get out. And that's the same problem they're going to have in Europe, trying to get out of Europe. They got to find buyers for those assets in an atmosphere, with that new regulation, CS3D regulation in effect. But the other side of Exxon, of course, and I'm thrilled with Darren Woods being out there, being a lot more vocal, is Exxon still fully endorses a carbon tax here in the United States, along with Shell and BP and Chevron and all the rest, all the other members of API and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is a country club Republican organization, both of them really. And, to that extent, the Exxon's as counterproductive as all the rest of them, but at least Darren Woods is vocally speaking out against that heavy regulation. And Exxon does take a more sensible direction overall than its competitors do, which is why it's so much more profitable and successful as a company.
The Exxon shares, they were let me look at the numbers, 339.2 billion in 2024 across their entire globe. The specific European revenue includes 20.6 billion from, and then 13.7 from the UK. So if they take a haircut, they will survive. It will be a significant haircut, but who will be the losers? It'll be the Europeans that will be the losers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would add in there that maybe Exxon and Darren Woods have been emboldened by what was uncovered during the House Judiciary Committee meetings last year about these different proxy voting groups that managed to install 3 activist type people onto the Exxon board. Engine number one and those guys, and just how the collusion was going forward. I think Exxon didn't understand the extent of it. And also, once all that was revealed, and then you have Trump being elected, I think Exxon's attitude may have been different had the Kamala and the Democratic machine got in. So if it was reversed and the Republicans hadn't been in power, I don't think Exxon would have been speaking out quite the way and as strongly as it is. But I do think that House Judiciary Committee revelations, just the extent of it. I mean, it is, I hope they pursue it further because it hasn't stopped. They kind of have slowed down a little bit, been not quite so vocal and public about what they're doing.
And had a lot of their money taken away, yeah.
They had a lot of their money taken away, but they're still doing it. They're still putting forward these shareholder positions, and which is why the SEC is trying to change, that's the Securities Exchange Commission, is trying to change how votes happen. Exxon has been behind that, where they want retail investors to be able to vote for themselves and not have some proxy voter out there voting on their behalf, or the institutional investors and so on. So I'm glad Exxon is finally stepping up. Maybe they didn't understand or the extent of the attacks against them, but it's good that they're speaking out because once you start down what the European Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive is, it's the transition plans. And even though they said, well, you have to have a transition plan, but you don't have to say precisely how you're going to go about achieving it, it allows, which is what he said in this interview, it's so open, it's so vague that litigators will have a field day. Suddenly it's like, well, why didn't you have this plan? Why didn't you have more detailed explanations of what you're doing? How are you going to do this? And they'll look to the courts to do the salami tactics, to drag it out through the courts and suck revenue out of the company. So, yeah, I agree. It's the changes they made were insignificant and just made it worse.
You bet. Irina, this quote from the Reuters article that David put out in his Substack. What's astounding to me is the overreach not only requires us to do that for businesses that we're doing in Europe, but it would require me to do that for all my business around the world, irrespective of whether it touches Europe or not. Go back to the numbers that I just gave you on $330 billion worth of revenues versus $20 billion worth of revenue. Where are you going to be as a CEO? I'm going to protect the fiduciary responsibilities of my company to my shareholders and stockholders, and finally really muscle up and stand up. I got real concerns, and this is the underlying cause of bifurcation of the markets. you're going to see it go this way. We're talking about a $330 billion company, huge company, but it's actually a bigger topic than that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
And
but the interesting thing about the European law is that if they find that you're not in compliance, that you haven't gone through with a fine-tooth comb throughout your entire supply chain, their fines are up to 5% of global revenue. So originally it was minimum 5%. Bam. Oh, but they changed it and said it'll be up to 5%. So even if it's 1 or 2%, that's a significant amount. So it's not like this is just chump change. If you if it turns out that you didn't comply properly, and which is open to interpretation of what's
Right.
compliance.
Yeah. And people need to realize that we've complained here for a month now about China's really aggressive move on rare earth minerals to try to prevent exports of rare earth minerals, not just from their own country, but globally, trying to lock down the entire global market by expanding their authority to impact exports by Bolivia, for crying out loud, or any other country on earth. This EU regulation is that on a different topic, but worse, even more overreaching and more onerous and more authoritarian in nature. And companies like ExxonMobil, and it's not just them, it's a lot of other companies, simply
Every
are not
company.
going to be able to invest the resources in complying with it, and will sue the EU to death to avoid paying those fines. I mean, it's going to generate the most massive array of litigation from both sides in world history if they go forward with that regulation.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that originally the plan is to phase it in over a period of years. And so the original threshold for who would have to comply was actually kind of low. And then they're like, oh well, this will hit medium-sized companies, so we'll just make it the really big corporations will have to do it. But when you have these really long and integrated supply chains, that ends up including a lot of medium-sized companies, small companies
Sure.
that will still have to provide all that information to the larger company.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it would just the ramifications are quite significant, and it's unfortunate that these, it takes so long to get a reaction. But again, it's the Trump effect, because if Kamala had won, there wouldn't have been any pushback at all. In fact, they would have embraced this and brought
And
it
Bill
into
Gates would have
America.
not
Yeah,
changed
but
a thing in what he was doing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Exxon wouldn't have embraced it. I mean, you can't force a company to stay in a place where the government policy is hurting its business.
Yeah, but I would argue that if the Democrats had been elected, they would have implemented something similar in the United States.
Yes, they
And
would.
so therefore, Exxon would have been compelled to do it because
Everywhere.
they're everywhere.
That's amazing. Even more amazing is the assumption in Brussels that they're going to comply because the EU market is so huge and so invaluable. Well, it's not. It's the
not.
Asian markets that are growth market. It's not
Yeah.
you. You're impoverishing your people, making life miserable for everyone. It's true.
It is true.
It is
So
true.
of course, countries are going to live, as Qatar and the US said. We're just not going to export LNG to you. Now, who needs who more? Does Europe need the US and Qatar more than the US and Qatar need the EU? I think it's a very obvious answer to this question, and it's not good for the EU. And we're off topic again.
No, but this
Sorry.
is all off topic. It's all
together.
It's all related, Irina.
I actually think it's linked. I have been thinking about it for a while. I have been arguing for it that there's a wind of change. It's getting really strong, especially after Trump came into office. So now big oil is emboldened to speak up, and Bill Gates is feeling this pressure. He's seeing a reaction against what he's doing, in addition to the vanishing of funds he needs. So it's not working out quite as they expected.
Yeah.
And they're starting to react to this, both big oil and and Bill Gates in this case. The EU would be the last, even though they're saying they will make certain concessions.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
Anyone?
Just one other point on all
Of
this
course.
with the EU is, last week, Donald Trump went all over the Pacific Rim and executed trade agreements with some of the most rapidly rising, growing economies in that part of the world. Powerful economies: Malaysia, Cambodia, South Korea, Japan. And we all said, well, that's a clear signal to China that they need to back off on the rare earths and do a trade deal with the United States. I think it's equally a clear signal to the EU that the leaders in the EU need to take a step back and really understand the implications of Trump administration executing these comprehensive trade, at least frameworks for comprehensive trade deals with these rapidly growing economies, while the EU's regulations are causing all the economies of Europe, and have been for 2 decades now, to stagnate and diminish. This is, America's going to do business where the business is, not just based on longstanding relationships and alliances that we would all like to see continue. The reality is that in the global marketplace, money talks, economic growth matters, and the United States investments are going to go where the business is. And the same is true of the corporations like ExxonMobil. And so, I would hope that some cooler heads at the EU would take a step back, look at what's happening, and behave a little more sensibly than they've been doing.
Well, let me throw something out, and this is a bit of a diversion from the conversation, but kind of related.
That's all right.
So,
We've diverted 7 times so far.
well, if the EU's wake-up call should be that Frans Timmermans' party received the lowest votes I think they've ever had in the recent Dutch election, and he's resigned, and I think they got 3% of the vote. So, it was really, really small in any event. And
he was a powerhouse 5 years
and
ago.
he was a powerhouse. He was the Green Deal czar. He was the one going around pushing it to everybody. And so the fact that that party got pretty much obliterated in this election should be a wake-up call to Ursula von der Leyen and the other leadership people at the European Union. But I don't know, because they like to double down on these things. The story today that Germany, after having blown up its last nuclear power plant, is going to invest $2 billion into fusion. So fission isn't good enough. And it's just the research. Like, what?
They're just going to double down.
Yeah. They're going to double down. And if I hear one more time about how much cheaper wind and solar is, I'm just going to...
Oh, my God.
I don't know.
It's the lamest talking point in the world at this point.
But there's also, in addition to doubling down on the insanity, they've started going on about federalizing the European Union. I've been noticing more frequently.
Yeah.
They're really losing control of the reins over the European Union, so that they're going all in. Let's federalize and pull all the resources and profiteer everyone from Brussels, because these people are so tone deaf. It's amazing.
That's what ties into that whole defense thing, right? And the critical minerals, because it's like we said last week. If all the individual countries have their own little stockpiles, who's responsible for the sharing? So Germany needs some, but France is holding it. And so their solution then is to federalize. If you federalize, then the supra-state will be the ones that will decide who gets what, when, and, at what price or whatever. And so it's like, if they want to increase the defense spending, if they want to have all these critical minerals, if they're going to have this AI in the different countries, then they all need to share the burden. And the easier way to share the burden is if you're a federal state, whether that's a sort of federal republic like the United States or a federation like Canada. That's what they're trial ballooning. They throw these ideas out there to see what's the public reaction. So
It's
what didn't
bad.
they like?
It's
Yeah,
really
right.
strongly negative, amazingly.
I
Right.
think energy security starts at home, and a European Union is not the answer.
Of course, it cannot be a federation. Federations don't just happen because somebody says they should happen.
Right.
They evolve.
Yeah.
Nobody studies history in Brussels. Nobody. It's really tragic. They have no notion of historical processes that inform future events and developments.
I don't know.
Not
I
really
think they have a
history
very
because
they have a select historical view. I think they like that idea of the old Holy Roman Empire, and that's what they would prefer. Honestly, because if you look at what they're doing,
that's crazy.
I know it's crazy, but look how they're acting.
Do they have any memory of how that whole Roman Empire ended up? At the end of the day.
No,
Well,
that's
I guess that
exactly
doesn't
what I
matter.
mean. I'm not fan of history as a discipline because I find it really hard to memorize dates and
Yeah.
years and events. But it's a very interesting subject, and there's a saying: you should know history to avoid repeating the mistakes.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. This time it will work.
This time it'll work. We'll do it
Yeah.
better.
Well, I mean, I look at the evolution of what's happening in finance, what's happening in banking, what's happening in the economy and the politics and the unrest and everything. And it's just a rewind of the 1970s.
Yes.
And if you look at like when the first Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, it was exactly like the 1970s, the same kind of responses. And then if you look now that there's potentially stagflation or whatever, and then you have the unrest amongst these so-called activist groups and whatever that are funded by probably entities that don't like the United States. It's just like the 1970s with the bombings and protests and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're repeating history, and they're making the same mistakes
Yep.
in how to deal with these different things.
Also, that's why it's so farcical because first time it's tragedy, the repeat is a farce. Oh, okay,
farce.
Yeah. Okay, shall we go to the stories?
Sure.
Oh, heck yeah.
Before we do that, one last little clip. This is about a 15, 20-second clip of Secretary Chris Wright, because the Biden administration and the Obama administration really set the green policies to effect. And I quite honestly wasn't aware of this rule. So
big building data centers everywhere, but that requires a lot more energy than we have right now. And the grids, it seems like, are getting kind of stressed. When will we have enough energy to be an AI powerhouse?
It will go in parallel. We are bringing energy on the grid today. Some of it is new power plant construction. That takes time. So those will come on. But there's a lot of just bad policies from the Biden administration that said, yes, you have that power plant there and it can produce power, but you're only permitted to run it 40 days a year because of our climate rules. So last summer, I was able to waive some of those regulations to prevent blackouts. We would have far more blackouts and even higher power prices if we had continued the trajectory of the Obama and Biden presidencies. They really were digging us into a hole. You go to Germany, go to United Kingdom and see 40 cents a kilowatt power. That's the trajectory we were on. And of course, you can't win the AI race with that. But there's some.
I thought that was very, very telling and very interesting on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everything he
Yeah.
says is interesting.
Yeah. Well, those rules were brought in through the I think partially through the DOE and partially through the EPA. And I think they were the result of litigation again. So, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go with these are my stories. I'm going to go with the second one first. And so this was a story, and the title is Climate Activists Lose Human Rights Case Over Norway Oil and Gas Drilling. So a bunch of a group of youths, and I put that in scare quotes, was led by Greenpeace and a bunch of other environmental groups, challenging Norway's approval of various offshore new developments of oil and gas fields offshore in the North Sea. And they lost in every Norwegian court. So after losing, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, they took it to the European Court of Human Rights, saying that the future of these children is being jeopardized by Norway's continued exploitation of oil and gas. And so therefore, they have to shut it all down. So the European Court of Human Rights said, actually, Norway hasn't violated the constitutional rights of the children and the citizens. However, it's a bit of a pirate victory, because the court then said that Equinor needs to take into account Scope 3 emissions, including the burning of oil and gas and the emissions from it, before any new oil projects and gas projects are approved. So in the environmental review process, the European Court is mandating the Norwegian government to mandate Scope 3 emissions accounting for any future developments. So basically that means if they're going to develop the oil and gas fields, they have to say what the emissions will be if people actually use their product, which is like extraordinary amount, and you'd never get approval. So yay, on the one hand, oh, you're not violating constitutional rights, but then the court goes and mandates Scope 3 emissions accounting. So once again, overstepping its authority. And I guess it'll be up to the Norwegian government of whether or not they're going to accept this ruling. But given that the Labour government got voted in again, I don't know. And they're sharing power with the Greens, who want to stop all oil and gas development. So who knows? That's why I say everyone's like, yay, the Norway won. These activists lost the case, but not really, because they got what they wanted, which was to get a court to mandate Scope 3 emissions accounting, which is what they're trying to do in Canada, by the way. And then the second story is one that came through just the other day, I think it was yesterday. And tests find that Chinese manufacturer can manipulate electric buses in Norway. Well, there's a big surprise. So a lot of these electric buses, electric vehicles, they have a lot of software, obviously, and it can be remotely accessed. And I would say it's not just the Chinese manufacturers. All EVs can be accessed remotely, whether it's a Tesla or Volkswagen, whatever, because they get the software updates all the time, all of these different things. You've got Uconnect, you've got OnStar in the United States. They can turn your car off and on. So what happens when it has all this other software in it for self-driving and whatever? So I think there needs to be some care, because what if there's a cyber attack and then suddenly the whole network is compromised?
Ford has a patent on the return to dealer if you miss a payment.
Right. So it's not just China. So I don't know. I think there needs to be some assessment of what this means and the implications, and then the public needs to maybe put some pressure on to say, what are we doing here?
Toyota put out one with the EVs where if you want to connect your phone to the radio, I believe it was Toyota that put that out there. One of the car manufacturers just had that out. I need to see which one, but they just bought a brand new car and they had to sign up for $8 a month to connect your phone so you could play your phone to the Bluetooth. And then if you wanted extra, you want to use the map feature, it was $20 a month. So it's kind of like a horrible thing going, whoa, I bought a car. I want to use the car. I don't want to pay a monthly fee.
Yeah.
Well, they're all doing that. Like this whole subscription-based service. I hate that I can't download Word software and just have it on my computer. Because the minute I stop paying that subscription, I lose access to my files. You can maybe read them, but you can't change anything.
Really?
So you have to, yeah, really. So then, unless you have like a really old version that you have on your computer that allows you to actually read and change your files, once your subscription's done, you can it's read only, no changes. And the way that they save the documents, it's not backwards compatible. So yeah, it's an issue. And
Black
John Deere
Mirror
does it
stuff.
with their tractors. So now if you want to use your PTO on a tractor, or you want to the air conditioning or the heat or some of these other things, you pay a subscription for every bit of it. And the tractor can be accessed remotely, but from John Deere headquarters. So it's not just, automobiles, it's throughout the entire what we're doing with tech right now. And it's like gaming. You can't buy a physical game. You have to go on to these stupid streaming things. So yeah, subscriptions only. Anyway, those are my stories. Thank you.
You also had these. I'm not sure if that was meant to be in there.
No, that way I think those were from last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
this is my Substack, the nemuthreport.substack.com. I put my podcasts up there and articles and whatnot. So please check it out when you have a chance and subscribe. That'd be great.
Well, so I forgot to send my links into Stu this week, so he picked them for me. I appreciate that, Stu. Chris Wright talks China deal, Alaska, Bill Gates, and more. I published this transcript from an interview Secretary Wright did. It's about an 8-minute interview segment on Fox News, with Bloomberg, and it's really good. He addresses a number of different topics. This was the interview I was referencing earlier when he said something I actually, for the first time, disagree with him on, and that was all the great benefits Bill Gates has produced in the past related to vaccines and other efforts in developing countries. I think he's been entirely destructive in those things, but I understand why the secretary would feel the need to say that. Then, of course, I did write a. Huh?
I said, just ask India about the vaccine.
Yeah, just ask India, exactly. And then the other one, I wrote a piece at the Daily Caller, was published Saturday, summarizing Gates's Lurch into Energy and Climate Reality. I got a nice little plug in for our podcast with that headline, and I appreciate that from the Daily Caller. And we're always in favor of energy reality here at the Energy Realities podcast. And that's it. There's really nothing new. We've talked about it all. My Substack is David Blackman's Energy Editions, because that's what we're in the midst of, is an energy edition and not a transition. And I would love to see y'all there. The address is blackman.substack.com. Very easy.
And I love Irina's Substack.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not going to talk about the animals because I'll get angry again. It's really touchy subject to me. But I'm going to talk about other animals, cows in Denmark. David, you mentioned Bovaer. And I've been seeing in the past couple of days on X people reporting that their cows are getting sick after they started giving them this additive. And I just Googled it. Of course, there's nothing in mainstream media, but there's a project by Aarhus University in Denmark, which started this year after they mandated Bovaer. I mean, farmers apparently have a choice between additional fat and Bovaer, and now they're starting a study to see whether Bovaer has an impact on the welfare of the cows. Just how animal friendly are we with this transition? So far, they've only researched whether Bovaer is doing its job in reducing methane emissions. Who cares about how the cows feel?
Right.
Now they've started, researching. Why does that sound familiar? I don't know, but it sounds weirdly familiar. Releasing something on the market without testing it sufficiently and only then collecting data to see whether it's actually safe. And the other thing that, the other story that drew my attention earlier today was a story in Le Monde, of all places, about a coming LNG glut. It's not the first story. I think legacy media is starting to hype up, in addition to the oil glut,
Yeah.
they're starting to hype up an LNG glut, which depends on every single LNG facility that is currently being planned getting actually built, which doesn't necessarily have to be the case. But they're starting early, basically saying there will be too much supply in just a few short years. Well, don't worry about it. It means it will get cheaper. That's good news, isn't it? But I think they're trying to tell us that there will not be enough demand because everyone will be so happy with wind and solar. And I seriously doubt that.
Well, so, with the
Well done,
LNG glut, is this because Qatar and Exxon are saying we're going to cut off supply? And so now they're trying to convince the people, well, there's too much anyway. It's not a problem. It'll be okay.
No, that's the funny thing. There will be too much. There isn't too much as of yet, but there will be too much if all those LNG plants on the Gulf Coast get built. And, there's two in Mozambique that are very, very far from completion due to, Islamist terrorist activity in the area. But yeah, they just go through what's planned for construction, I imagine. I said, no, there's going to be too much LNG on the global market. That's good news, people.
Brings prices down.
The suggestion is there won't be enough demand. Well, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And with
we know
Bovair-
without doubt, maybe half of those will get built. Ultimately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't assume that everything will get built.
I was
So
going to
it's-
say with Bovair, they haven't been studying if there's a change to the milk and what the impacts on people are who consume it.
Well, of course they haven't. It's safe.
Well, we
It
have to let
reduces
people
people
safe.
try
contamination.
first, and then
All
we'll
right.
research it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait for people to get sick, I guess. I don't know.
Mm.
I love Patrick Devine. He says it's supposed to help the cows stop burping. Well, it's going to help them when they're dead because they're they're not going to burp when they're dead. This is actually not a good thing. And
That's a
I love Brian messing with the food supply is
That is
insane.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we're messing around with evolution because nature has created the best grass converter ever in the history of the world. And that is a cow's 4 stomachs that processes it all and makes, this amazing milk. And why are we messing with that? They talk about how we shouldn't be intervening with nature and all this other kinds of stuff. And yet the environmentalists are okay with intervening with nature this way?
Exactly. When
Another
they
hypocrisy.
do it, it's all right. When somebody else wants to do it, not in the same way that they do it. I mean, look at this owl story. It's fine if we shoot almost 500,000 birds to save another bird. Really?
It's insane. Yeah.
It's worked so well in the past, every single time. No problem at all. Okay, I'm done.
Well,
this is about the 5th time the United States has gone insane over the damn spotted owl, by the way, since the 70s. I mean, it's just like every 10 years we have a mass massacre of some other species to save this owl that's apparently incompetent in saving itself. Why are we doing this? Stop the madness.
Well, it's still trudging along. It's not even endangered. So
right. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of money in that thing. Yeah.
But where's the environmentalist outrage over wind turbines killing billions of bats and billions of birds that have even a greater reach? But that's just me being stupid.
Well, maybe somebody should tell them that turbines kill spotted owls.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
And lizards.
That'd be amazing as an activist.
Yeah, we already talked about this one. This story was out of Zero Edge. ExxonMobil has sued California to stop the enforcement of two climate reporting laws. We've already hashed this one until it's a dead spotted owl. Yahoo and Bloomberg writes the first law requires companies with more than 1 billion in annual revenue calculate and disclose. This goes back to the same thing. It's an overreach out of California's law impacting the entire market reach that ExxonMobil has.
Yeah.
And then let's go back to the other story there. The surge in rooftop blazes sparks concern. Tammy, you sent this out over Miliband
this
Solar.
morning, yeah.
Yeah, it was a great article, and I took it one step further. There is a insurance thing going on across the U.S. and they don't report it, but and everybody says that, oh, by the way, the quiet litmus test in the room for policies is insurance rates. They don't publish a lot of it, and I'm having to dig into it. So I'm going into that story there. But on your bus story that you did, it was an outstanding one. I took that as a headline, and then I went and looked at other stories that I'd already written over the past several years. And there is a real problem with anybody that is buying Chinese electronics. A benefit or a feature, I haven't figured this out, is remote control or being able to shut down. And the Chinese can remotely shut down phone systems and major grid components across all things they manufacture. So if you buy Chinese equipment, it is a feature.
Yep.
Not a bug. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Also had Illinois' governor. I love this war that was going on between the Democrats and the Republicans. And the war is basically saying Governor Pritzker is not going on a diet. That's not the story. The story is that he's actually out there saying that this storage bill is going to save consumers money. And it does not make any sense. It's not going to save any money. In fact, it's going to increase your bill, but they're advertising it. This is another, instead of the Inflation Reduction Act by Nancy Pelosi, which turned out to be the biggest porculus bill on the planet, this is the same thing. So you can find me on theenergynewsbeat.substack.com, or you can find me on energynewsbeat.co or energynewsbeat.com. So
Awesome.
Great talk today. Thanks for all the comments. Anyone want to sum up what conclusions we came to today? If we came
I
to
like
any?
this one. This comment:
That's
fascism is a
great.
public-private partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
like
but they've
not
improved on it.
Awesome.
They've improved on it because now it's a PPP, philanthropy, public private partnership.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
the thing that came out of WEF a couple of years ago. where philanthropy money should also partner with corporations and partner with governments in order to accelerate the climate transition.
I want to throw this out to the panel real quick as we get into COP. Is it 30? COP 30, baby. And if you sit back and think about the lack of the U.S. participation in COP 30, I would like to vote for the UN to be thrown out of the United States and the United States pull out of the UN, but that's just me. I think the UN's overreach with the EU's overreach is, again, a gigantic problem. And what is your all's opinion about COP with so many people not attending?
It'll be fun.
Well, it'll be the same old, same old.
With
U.S.
fewer
won't have
people.
a formal delegation there, although there are members of Congress, 30, I think, rhinos and Democrats that are forming their own delegation. So, there's grift to be had, and they've got to go get in on it, right? And it's a free trip to Bellum, at taxpayers' expense, and they'll get to have their $1,000 dinners with $2,000 bottles of wine, and everybody will be fat and happy. But otherwise, it's just another COP conference. They'll finish it with some proclamation, and and we'll go
There'll
on.
be
I think
more promises.
they're going to try and bring a global carbon trading,
Mhm.
carbon
Yeah,
emissions trading thing.
yeah.
Yeah, because
And
last year it went so well with all those pledges of however many billions of rich countries helping to pay for poor countries. That went well.
Yeah, but apparently they've improved. So that's the goal,
Okay.
along with governing climate misinformation. That's the other one.
here's a great
Oh, yeah.
example from last year's. They all got together and they signed this. This multinational pledge to never build any more non-abated coal-fired power plants anywhere on Earth, and China has opened about 2 of them every week since. Right. So, I mean, how effective was that?
Oh, but
Exactly.
they're abated. They're abated because they
They're
build all that
abated.
wind and solar.
Yeah, exactly.
The
Hey,
amount.
next week we have Brian. Brian Zinchuk's
We
going to
have
Yes.
Brian
be
Zinchuk
special
next week.
guest.
Yes,
So
that'll be
Looking
wonderful.
forward to it, Brian.
The amount of new coal plants, I just did the global energy search thing. I did an article on it, and the number of new coal plants in India under construction and implementing in India. You look at that. We actually had a new one open up in the United States, a new coal plant, and we had a new coal mine start rolling. So the energy secretary in the United States is now, the United States has got one to the hundreds of being built around the world. It's pretty impressive to see that you're going to either go down solid energy fiscal responsibility or you're going to fail.
yeah.
Yep.
Great last words.
With that, we're going to have a
Well,
great one next week with Brian.
Thanks,
Everyone have
everybody.
a lovely week.
Thanks, everybody.